In Chapter 2, we'll examine how to apply non-destructive layer adjustments. The goal of this chapter is learning how to enhance the brightness, contrast, and tonality of your photos using various adjustment layers that give you the ability to work in a non-destructive fashion. Download the assets provided and open up Photoshop. An adjustment layer applies color and tonal adjustments to your image without permanently changing pixel values. For example, rather than making a levels or curves adjustment directly to your image, you can create a levels or curves adjustment layer. The color and tonal adjustments are stored in the adjustment layer and applied to all the layers below it. You can correct multiple layers by making a single adjustment rather than adjusting each layer separately. You can discard your changes and restore the original image at any time. Now let's take a look at different types of adjustment layers and what they do. In this photo, we'd like to enhance the saturation of the photo without making it look overdone. This is where the Vibrance setting assists us. Vibrance adjusts the saturation so that clipping is minimized as colors approach full saturation. This adjustment increases the saturation of less saturated colors more than colors that are already saturated. Vibrance also prevents skin tones from being oversaturated. First, we'll create a Vibrance adjustment layer. Second, let's drag the Vibrance slider to the right to increase the vibrance of the colors. Excellent. Now let's see what it looks like if we increase the saturation to a very high amount. Yikes! In this example, we'd like to enhance the saturation of the topiary, grass, and tree. First, we'll create a HueSaturation adjustment layer. HueSaturation lets you adjust the hue, saturation, and lightness of a specific range of colors in an image or simultaneously adjust all the colors in the image. Click the HueSaturation icon in the Adjustments panel or from the Layers panel. The two color bars in the dialog box represent the colors in their order on the color wheel. The upper color bar shows the color before the adjustment, and the lower bar shows how the adjustment affects all of the hues at full saturation. In the Properties panel, choose from the menu to the right of the On-Image Adjustment tool. Choose Master to adjust all colors at once. Choose one of the other preset color ranges listed for the color you want to adjust. To modify the color range, specify the range of colors adjusted using HueSaturation. Choose a HueSaturation preset from the Preset menu. We can also convert it to a black and white. While Photoshop applies a default grayscale conversion, we can choose additional presets. Let's see how those same presets look on another image. What I'd like to do with this photo is increase the brightness in the midtones. One way we could do that is with the Levels adjustment layer. Let's check it out. First, we'll open the Levels adjustment layer. You use the Levels adjustment to correct the tonal range and color balance of an image by adjusting intensity levels of image shadows, midtones, and highlights. The Levels histogram is a visual guide for adjusting the image key tones. Since I'd like to increase the brightness of the midtones, I'll drag the midtone slider to the left to open the shadows. To adjust midtones, use the middle input slider to make a gamma adjustment. Moving the middle input slider to the left makes the overall image lighter. This slider adjustment maps a lower, darker level up to the midpoint level between the output sliders. If the output sliders are in their default position, 0 and 255, the midpoint is level 128. In this example, the shadows expand to fill the tonal range from 0 to 128, and the highlights are compressed. Moving the middle input slider to the right has the opposite effect, making the image darker. If I wanted to impact the highlights of shadows in this photo, I would adjust either the highlight or shadow sliders. The outer two input level sliders map the black point and white point to the settings of the output slider. By default, the output sliders are at level 0 where the pixels are black and level 255 where the pixels are white. With the output sliders in the default position, moving the black input slider maps the pixel level to level 0, and moving the white point slider maps the pixel level to level 255. The remaining levels are redistributed between level 0 and 255. This redistribution increases the tonal range of the image, in effect increasing the overall contrast of the image. I want to increase the contrast of this photograph I took of my friend Kate while having the ability to make fine-tune adjustments. This would be an appropriate use of the Curves Adjustment layer. In the Curves Adjustment, you adjust points through an image's tonal range. Initially, the image's tonality is represented as a straight diagonal line on a graph. When adjusting an RGB image, the upper right area of the graph represents the highlight, and the lower left area represents the shadow. The horizontal axis of the graph represents the input levels, the original image values, and the vertical axis represents the output values, or the newly adjusted values. As you add control points to the line and move them, the shape of the curve changes, reflecting your image adjustments. The steeper section of the curve represents area of higher contrast, while flatter sections represent areas of lower contrast. You can save Curves Adjustment settings as presets. First, I'll click to set a point in the 3/4 tone area, and then drag it down to make the shadow areas darker. Next, I'll click to set a point in the mid-tone area, and then drag it up a little to open up the midtones that were darkened when I dragged the shadow area curve down. If my highlights get clipped, then I can easily make adjustments to the highlight area. For this image, we'd like to decrease the brightness of the photo in order to bring back some detail in the skin. The brightness contrast adjustment lets you make simple adjustments to the tonal range of an image. Moving the brightness slider to the right increases tonal value and expands image highlights. Dragging it to the left decreases values and expands shadows. The contrast slider expands or shrinks the overall range of tonal values in the image. In normal mode, brightness and contrast applies proportionate, non-linear adjustments to the image layer, as with levels and curves adjustment. When Use Legacy is selected, brightness and contrast simply shifts all pixel values higher or lower when adjusting brightness. Since this can cause clipping or loss of image detail in highlight or shadow area, using brightness and contrast in Legacy mode is not recommended for photographic images, but can be useful for editing masks or scientific imagery. We'd like to warm up this photo a little bit. One way to do that is through the Photo Filter Adjustment layer. The Photo Filter Adjustment mimics the technique of placing a colored filter in front of the camera lens to adjust the color balance and color temperature of the light transmitted through the lens and exposing the film. Photo Filter also lets you choose a color preset to apply a hue saturation to an image. If you want to apply a custom color adjustment, the Photo Filter Adjustment lets you specify a color using the Adobe Color Picker. First, I'm going to use a warming filter to warm up this image. Warming filter 85 in LBA and cooling filter 80 in LBB are color conversion filters that tune the white balance in an image. If an image was photographed with a lower color temperature of light, yellowish, the cooling filter 80 makes the image colors bluer to compensate for the lower color temperature of the ambient light. Conversely, if the photo was taken with a higher color temperature of light, bluish, the warming filter 85 makes the image color warmer to compensate for the higher color temperature of the ambient light. See how nice this image looks now that we've warmed it up? You can use the History panel to jump to any recent state of the image created during the current working session. Each time you apply a change to an image, the new state of the image is added to the panel. For example, if you select, paint, and rotate part of an image, each of those states is listed separately in the panel. When you select one of the states, the image reverts to how it looked when the change was first applied. You could then work from that state. You could also use the History panel to delete image states and in Photoshop to create a document from a state or snapshot. To display the History panel, choose Window, History, or click the History panel. Let's use the History panel for creative purposes. First, we'll stylize it by going to Filter, Stylize, Oil Paint. Next, we'll select our history state and paint away the oil paint effect on her face. Pretty cool. A quick note. When you close the history panel, all of the history states go away. That's why working with layers, mask, and adjustment layers when possible is a better solution than just relying on the history panel. Now that we learned how to enhance the brightness, contrast, and tonality of our photos using various adjustment layers that give us the ability to work in a non-destructive fashion, let's look at how to modify our canvas.